At 7:30 p.m. on the 7th of April 1979, 18-year-old Robyn Elizabeth Hickie was seen by her parents wearing a pink floral dress at a bus stop opposite their home at Belmont North. Sadly, that would be the last time they would ever see her. It's now 45 years since her disappearance. In this video, I will focus specifically on Robyn and her disappearance, including information I have not covered previously. I will start with the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. I found Jim Hickie, Robyn's father, gives a good description in an interview published in Melbourne's The Sunday Age on the 8th of February 1998, which was under the headline, "A Killer on the Road." "She'd been playing netball," Mr. Hickie said. "She came home, she had a shower, and then she and my wife, Mrs. Mary Hickie, tootled off to get some chicken packs. They came home, they were eating their dinner, and then Robyn got a phone call and said she was going out. It was April, still quite light outside." Now, I thought that was a little unusual because I don't think it would have been light because of the time of year, because I did check and daylight saving finished a month before. The sun set about an hour and a half before she left home, so I don't think it would have been light because of the sun. I mean, it could be street lighting, but it seems a bit odd he'd say it was particularly light at that time. I did think maybe it was a full moon or something like that, so I checked that, and seems it could be the moon because full moon was on the 11th, which is only a few days later, so it would have been fairly bright. And I checked the time it rose, which was about 3 hours before, so I expect it would have been about 45-degree angle in the east, so it would have provided a bit of light, I assume. But either way, it must have been reasonably light because there were two other lots of witnesses who travelled and reported seeing her because they were acquainted with her, so they would recognise her, so it was light enough for that. And one of them did report they saw her at 7:20 p.m, so the times match too. So continuing with his account, she went to the bus stop across the road. She said she would be home around 11 p.m. Of course, we didn't wait up, it was so totally normal. But then in the morning, Mary came bursting in and said, "Have I seen Robyn?" Her bed had not been slept in. We had kennels and we thought maybe she's with the dogs or in one of the other bedrooms. It takes a minute for you to sort out in your mind that she is missing. But we found out that she hadn't got where she was going and called the police. The Hickies reported the disappearance of their daughter at 8:30 a.m. For 2 weeks, the police kept saying, "She'll be right, she'll be back, give her time, give her time." It's been 19 years. So that was in 1998. Now, most of the media reports say she was meeting friends at the Belmont Hotel and was last seen at either 7:15 p.m. or 7:30 p.m, depending which account you read. The discrepancy, I think, occurs because She left home at about 7:15 p.m. and her parents recalled seeing her at about 7:30 p.m. waiting at the bus stop across the road. However, I came across a brief description of her disappearance in a document published in 2014 called Police Culture in New South Wales in the 1960s to 70s. Now, this was by a crime writer called Robert A. Dealenberg, and he put little descriptions of incidents that occurred during that time period, and he had one on Robyn Hickie where he says, Robyn Elizabeth Hickie, 17, now different places say 17, 18. I thought I'd do a bit of a check. I found a document where, was it I'll put a little description at the bottom where I saw this. But it had her date of birth as May 2, 1962, which would have meant she would have been 16 when she disappeared. So that was confusing. That website said they'd gotten the information from New South Wales Police, which, given how thorough they were at the time, they could have got that year wrong. But I did note in March 1998, Jim Hickie did say if she was alive that she would have just turned 37 in March 1998, which would mean she would have been born early 1961. Now, I was thinking with May 2, maybe got the American way of dating mixed up, so perhaps it was the 5th of February 1961, but that's just an assumption. This is Future David. Since recording this video, I've found a reason for the age discrepancies. This was in the Newcastle Herald, published on the 11th of December 2001. In this article, Jim Hickie states, I went down to Belmont Police Station to report it. The police officer was quite casual. His attitude was an 18-year-old could go wherever they wanted without telling anyone. I couldn't convince police something terrible must have happened to her. Mr. Hickie even lowered her age to 17 on the missing persons report in the hope police would take it more seriously. I wasn't happy about the investigation, he said. They were convinced she was a runaway, and my wife and I came to the conclusion that the police were trying to blame our daughter for the crime. So, there we have the explanation. The missing persons report says 17, but she was actually 18. Anyway, back to the rest of the excerpt from the document about the New South Wales Police in the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, so Robyn Elizabeth Hickie, 17, abducted. Dental nurse Hickie left her home at 19:15 p.m. after arranging to meet a netball teammate at the Belmont Hotel. So a lot of references say she was meeting friends. There are a few that say netball teammate, so probably was friends she played netball with. Yes, for a social drink. She was last seen in a lounge disco area between 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. unsolved. Now, I've never seen that mentioned before, that there was a sighting in the lounge disco area between 8 and 8:30 p.m. And I think her friends that she was meeting would know that if she'd gotten there. So That seemed a bit odd. Now, I did come across a mention in the Newcastle Herald on the 7th of July 2001 that a witness had claimed that Robyn was seen, or that they saw her, at the Orana Hotel at Blacksmiths with another girl that night. So I am thinking maybe that's what the 8:30 reference was, but not at the Belmont Hotel, but at the Orana Hotel. Though you'd think if she was with another girl, that other girl would know that and have reported that information. So I think that may not have been a reliable claim that was later dismissed, because you never hear of that mentioned anywhere else, either before or since, or not that I've seen of. So everyone seems to say that the last confirmed sighting of her was at the bus stop at Belmont North. Future David again. As an interesting little aside regarding the Orana Hotel and Ivan Milat, on the 9th of January 1998, the Newcastle Herald reported, workmen from the Department of Main Roads were working near the Orana Hotel on the Pacific Highway at Blacksmiths on April 7, 1979, a few kilometres from where Robyn Hickie disappeared. Detectives are probing employment records from the department to ascertain Mr. Milat's movements. As I said in the video, it probably wasn't Robyn at the Orana Hotel, and it would seem odd she went there when she had just arranged to meet friends at the Belmont Hotel. Unless, of course, she got confused about which pub they were meeting at, and back then there were no mobile phones to call and check why someone hadn't turned up. But I do like to keep my mind open to all possibilities, and while it might be a remote chance, it is possible it may have been Robyn at the Orana Hotel, and probable Ivan Milat was working on the road gang near there that day. If so, then it would not be unusual to expect he could have gone to the Orana Hotel for a drink after a hard day's work as a road ganger for the Department of Main Roads. And it is also known he would sometimes even stay at the Orana Hotel when he was working in the area. Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought and let you get back to the video. And there was another thing I saw mentioned, but it was only once, and that was in the Sunday Telegraph on the 15th of February 1998. And it says there, Robyn Hickie disappeared from a bus stop on the Pacific Highway at Belmont, so that matches, on April 7, 1979. Then it says, police searched the area, but a shoe was the only trace they found of the teenager. And that is the only reference I've seen to police searching the site and finding her shoe. So that kind of implies, however she left the bus stop, it would seem odd that if she lost a shoe, or that she wouldn't retrieve it or go home and get another shoe before going out, because it'd be a bit odd going out with one shoe. Which implies that, yes, maybe she was forcibly removed from the bus stop. And another thing I'd like to know is, when did the police search it? Because you kind of get the impression, if they kept telling the parents for a couple of weeks, she'll be right, she'll be home, that they wouldn't have even bothered searching. So I imagine it would have been at least 2 weeks later that they searched it, or maybe it was 20 years later. In December 2019, NBN News interviewed a friend that Robyn was meeting at the Belmont Hotel. And this is what she had to say about Robyn and arranging to meet her.
Her best friend has been missing for 40 painful years. Kerry Shannon remembers Robyn as an attractive, confident, fun-loving girl with a wicked sense of humour.
She had the whole world ahead of her. She was very social. She had everything to live for. It's had a huge impact. Like, it never goes away. You never not think about her. There might be times in your life where you go through a period where you don't, but it always comes up.
The Saturday night she disappeared, Robyn had been planning to meet Kerry and another friend at the Belmont Hotel. Robyn promised she'd catch the bus from Jules and wouldn't hitchhike. She never arrived.
The only way she would have got into a car with someone is if she knew them or they were familiar to her.
So it seems unlikely that she would have been hitchhiking and that she didn't meet her friends at the Belmont Hotel either. In a report in the Daily Telegraph on the 24th of February 2022, it also stated, "There is no concrete evidence Robyn ever boarded a bus, even though she was last seen at the bus stop." So at this point, we don't even know if she got on the bus, though the shoe being found, if that's the case, would suggest she probably didn't. And as I've discussed in previous videos, that in recent years it's been found out the bus drivers, there were a few bus drivers at that time that have proven to be a bit dodgy, you might say. But I'll discuss that more when I make a video about Amanda Robinson's disappearance. So it would have been interesting to know who the bus driver was, and if police investigate at the time, probably would have found out and questioned him and found out if she got on the bus or not. But even if they questioned him 2 weeks later when they started to take it seriously, probably wouldn't remember even in that time. Anyway, continuing with that article. She was planning on heading to a Belmont pub to meet up with friends and was known to have stopped hitchhiking after an incident interstate. However, detectives also suspect she may have been picked up by someone known to her. Now, this leads on to an odd incident occurring a few days after her disappearance. This was reported in the Newcastle Herald on the 9th of January 1998. And it said, "Another link is a mysterious telephone call which the family of missing teenager Robyn Hickie received only days after their daughter disappeared." He said a mysterious telephone call that his wife Mary received a few days after their daughter's disappearance was being examined closely by detectives. So I assume this is in 1998. "The guy was sympathetic but quite strange," Mr. Hickie said. "It was as though he knew something. From what we've been told, that phone call is now very significant." So it seems likely whoever was calling was either possibly involved or knew something about who was involved, because at that point it wouldn't have been reported in the media unless it was someone local and there'd been gossip about it disappearing. But anyway, when I read that, my first thoughts went to Warren McCorriston, partly because from what I've seen in the media and comments I've received from people who knew him or knew people who did know him, that kind of sounds a bit like how he would be, perhaps sympathetic, but a bit odd. And if you haven't seen my previous videos or know about Warren McCorriston, he is the most recent person of interest that they're strongly looking into, but I'll mention a bit more later. Okay, Robyn's sister, Louise, also recalled the suspicious phone call, and this is what was reported at the time of the inquest, and that it was reported on the same day as the phone call was made to the police. Future David again. In the Newcastle Herald on the 11th of December 2001, I found more details on the odd phone call the Hickies received, and it raises more questions. Mr. and Mrs. Hickie received a telephone call from a person they believe was responsible for Robyn's disappearance, but they were not asked to give a statement to police until Strikeforce Fenwick took over the investigation in 1998. I am convinced that person was the perpetrator of what happened to Robyn, Mr. Hickie said. Mary took the call. It was 3 days after Robyn disappeared and a week before police had even made it public. This person knew Robyn was missing. He also had personal details of our family that only someone who knew the family could know. Mrs. Hickie said she was immediately suspicious when the caller told her he was staying at a Swansea hotel and got their business number from the hotel directory. Mrs. Hickie said they did not advertise their Belmont North kennels in hotel and motel directories. It was a very strange call, and I contacted the police immediately, she said. Now, I found it interesting the caller said he was staying at a Swansea hotel, as in the Newcastle Herald on the 6th of July 2002, it does mention some of the places Ivan Milat stayed when he worked in Newcastle, and the list did include Swansea. I'll leave it there and you can get back to the video without any more of these interruptions. Now, I'm going to play some excerpts from NBN television news reports about Warren McCorriston when he initially became the current person of interest, which was at the end of 2019.
This new person of interest is originally from Newcastle, but he's been living here in Surfers Paradise. He's recently been charged with sexual offences relating to women he met online, including rape. Why do you think police have targeted you as a person of interest? Do you have anything to say about your recent charges of sexual assault allegations? Did you see Robyn Hickie or Amanda Robinson on the night they disappeared?
I have no comment, thank you.
Do you think police have wrongly targeted you?
I have no comment, thank you.
It's taken 40 years, but today police moved in, pouncing on a 58-year-old Gold Coast man this afternoon. Detectives from Strikeforce Arapaima, with assistance from Queensland Police, taking the former Lake Macquarie resident to Southport Watch House, where he remains in custody. He's been arrested on historic sexual assault and serious assault offences in the Lake Macquarie region.
Anyway, continuing, the recent Strikeforce Arapaima uncovered unrelated sexual assaults from the 1980s and 1990s committed by Warren McCorriston, for which he was found guilty and sentenced in June 2021. One of the victims was an ex-partner of his, and she was interviewed by NBN television in October 2021. She discussed his violent assaults upon her and what he had mentioned to her in relation to Robyn Hickie at the time in the early 1980s.
These latest developments have prompted a woman to speak publicly for the first time. In 1981, she was 19, and in a relationship with Belmont man Warren McCorriston, she suffered months of violent attacks.
He was punching me, and he ended up breaking my ribs and puncturing my lung. I felt like he was going to kill me, and I felt like it was on his mind all the way to that hospital. The attacks and the rage were coming from nowhere. You couldn't predict it, you couldn't see it coming, and all of a sudden he would just attack.
She recalls him talking about how he knew Robyn Hickie. They had attended Belmont High School together, but he never wanted to talk about her disappearance.
He would always shut the conversation down. He was never willing to speak about her. Later on, he told me that he would catch the same bus as Robyn into town to work.
So if he was catching the same bus as her, you'd imagine he would then know where she got on and off and have a rough idea where she'd live, and if she was waiting at the bus stop, he would have known that was her pretty clearly. He also lived around the corner from the Belmont Hotel where she was going to that night, so if perhaps she got on the bus and got off at the Belmont Hotel, maybe he come across her there. Robyn's friend in the 2001-2002 inquest did acknowledge that she would have accepted a lift from someone she knew, and possibly even accept a lift from someone she'd known from visiting one of the pubs in the Belmont area. Now, admittedly, at the time, nothing was known about Warren McCorriston, and that question was asked in relation to Ivan Milat being a strong person of interest at the time because he was working in the area, stayed at hotels in the area, and also frequented them. There was a witness who said Ivan Milat was at the Belmont Hotel the previous night to her disappearance. But at that time, Ivan Milat wasn't the only person of interest, as there are up to, it seems, 60 other persons of interest to varying degrees. However, more recent media reports have said that Ivan Milat is no longer a person of interest, though I have not come across any reasoning for that determination. Yeah, so in the end, 6 persons of interest that were interviewed as witnesses at the inquest, the coroner could not eliminate any of them as persons of interest, even though 2 of them had alibis accounting for where they were. The coroner did not consider them strong and still considered them possibilities. One of those people who, in theory, accounted for his whereabouts that evening was a neighbour of Robyn's who had a mental illness, and when he was in Morisset Hospital, he'd have psychotic episodes where he claimed he hit Robyn over the back of the head with a rock and disposed of her body in their backyard, meaning his backyard. But when Strike Force Fenwick came along in the late 90s, they did a thorough search of where he was living and also surrounding areas, and they never found any evidence of that. So we've never heard anything of that, so I don't think that's since then, so I suppose that's not a strong lead, and for some reason they've dismissed that possibility. Anyway, going back to April 1979, 13 days after Robyn Hickie's disappearance, we had the disappearance of 14-year-old Amanda Robinson. This led to the actual first media reports that mention Robyn Hickie's disappearance. On the 23rd of April, the Newcastle Morning Herald had an article on the front page, which was mainly about Amanda, but did include a photo of Robyn and described her as Robyn Hickie is about 160 centimetres or 5 foot 4 inches tall, of slim build, light brown hair and blue eyes. She was wearing a pink floral dress the night she disappeared. On page 14, the next day, being the 24th of April, there was another article about their disappearances, with photos of Robyn's mother, Mary Hickie, and the bus stop where she was last seen. The article included the statement, "Her disappearance is proving a mystery for police." Didn't elaborate, but anyway. Around the same time, Jim Sullivan of NBN Television, which at the time was referred to as Channel 3, also reported on Robyn's disappearance and included an interview with her mother, Mary.
The police have also searched bushland in this area, but have found nothing, and they now hold grave fears for Robyn's safety. Were you immediately concerned?
Very concerned because it was so out of character for her.
2 days after the first Newcastle Morning Herald report, being the 25th of April, it was reported on page 5, "Homicide men join hunt." 2 homicide detectives from Sydney have joined the search for missing Lake Macquarie teenagers Amanda Robinson and Robyn Hickie. Police investigating the disappearances have been working 24 hours a day, interviewing witnesses and checking reported sightings. So that makes it sound like they're very busy. So it seems the police were now taking Robyn's disappearance seriously. There may have been further reports at the time, but it seems the story just faded away. The next time I found Robyn's disappearance appearing in the media was over 18 years later, on the 11th of September 1997. The front page of the Newcastle Herald reported that 7 police and cadaver dogs had searched bushland at Belmont and Adamstown for 2 hours as a result of disturbed soil being seen at the time of Robyn and Amanda's disappearances. This had followed an offer of a $100,000 reward for information a few months before. Now, nothing came of those searches, but interestingly, I noted the following statement in that article, which was from Senior Constable Tony Tamplin. Now, he was a very popular and well-liked police officer in the Newcastle area at the time who did a lot of the PR work for the police. And he stated, "There was a thorough investigation when the girls went missing, and we are still looking." So on the surface, it appears everything is positive. The police had taken the disappearances seriously, and they hadn't forgotten about the cases. They were always and still were on their radar. But was this true? Now, the statement Tony Tamplin made, I imagine that was the information he was provided with, and he probably believed it because that's what should have been happening. So no disrespect to him. But there were many media reports after that, particularly during the time of the 2001 and 2002 inquest, that pretty much show that wasn't the case. And I'll read you a bit from the Sydney Morning Herald that was printed on the 5th of July 2002, reporting on the inquest and what it had to say regarding the police and their initial investigations. Robyn Hickie, 18, who went missing on April 7, 1979, after arranging to meet a netball teammate at the Belmont Hotel, was labelled by police as a known hitchhiker. Her disappearance earned a few weeks of intense investigation, but she was regarded as another runaway, and only 2 statements were taken. Now, early on in the inquest, they actually thought a lot of the information and statements must have been lost or disposed of because they could only find 2. But subsequently, they found information that indicated there were only 2 statements taken. Anyway, continuing. The homicide detectives told the inquest this week they were sent to concentrate exclusively on Amanda's case, and so did not examine the possible connections with Robyn's disappearance 2 weeks earlier. So what was reported in the Newcastle Herald at the time, that they were sent up to look into both cases, was not entirely true. Words such as unstructured and largely dysfunctional, lazy police work, and directionless were among the descriptions used in court to capture the police effort, and it is likely these will be reflected in Abernethy's findings today. So he's the coroner for that inquest. The coroner has already voiced some criticisms of the investigation, or lack thereof, saying this week it was extraordinary that records were not kept, statements never taken, and the investigation shut down within a year of the 3 going missing. He could not understand why it had taken 23 years for the matter to be referred to a coroner. He said the records before the inquest were so inadequate that it's all guesswork. It was not until 20 years after the three went missing that the first major investigation began with the formation of Strike Force Fenwick. So the third one there was Leanne Goodall, who disappeared at the end of 1978. And Strike Force Fenwick, that was established in March 1998, 19 years after the disappearances. In his criticisms of the original police investigation, Detective Superintendent Ron Smith, head of Fenwick, told the inquest last year that police should have treated the disappearances as suspected homicides. Instead, they were treated as runaways. Investigators failed to consider a serial killer, he said. After the inquest, it seems not much more happened until the formation of Strike Force Arapaima in April 2019, which is still ongoing and is looking into the disappearances of Robyn Hickie, Amanda Robinson, and Gordana Katevsky, who disappeared in 1994. Her disappearance is not considered related to the other two. I know people do question why Leanne Goodall's disappearance in 1978 is not included as part of Strike Force Arapaima. Apparently, they are only considering cold cases that occurred in the Lake Macquarie area, and Leanne Goodall was last seen in Newcastle, even though she also lived at Belmont and was probably intending to go there that night.
In the New South Wales Police, we regularly go through cold case reviews, and these were 3 cold case reviews that had that particular Lake Macquarie feel that we felt if we put investment into it that there's something that we could get a result for.
I won't go further into Strike Force Arapaima here, as I have covered that in a lot of my previous videos. At some stage in the future I may, I probably will, go over Strike Force Fenwick in the late 90s in a lot more detail. Now, from going over various media reports, it seems Jim Hickie has always been active and generally supported further investigations. However, at the same time, he wants it to be finalised and over with, and has always felt there'll be no answers with only disappointment and frustrations. And as an example of his frustrations, I'll read you a bit from an article in the Sun from the February 1998. I always regretted not being stronger with the police, not pushing them to do more. But you trust them, don't you? You assume they know what they are doing, Mr. Hickie said. I regret that now. I wish, like Mrs. Katevsky, I had maintained the rage. So that's Gordana Katevsky's mother. For Mr. Hickie, there are no new leads. But I don't want a new investigation. For 19 years, our lives have been punctuated by this, and it just can't go on forever. You can't have your lives disrupted every time it blows up with a new lead. I want to finalise the police involvement. I have had enough. Clearly frustrated, and I can understand why. Mr. Hickie also wants to know what became of Robyn's things, the ones he gave police to assist them with their initial inquiries 19 years ago. She was studying to be a dental technician, and as part of her training, she had to make a plate of her own mouth, a copy of her teeth, he said. I gave it to police because I thought that if something had happened to her, it might be important. It might be the only way if they ever found a body. But they never did find a body, and so, after about 15 years, I asked for it back, but I never got it. They couldn't find it. I don't know where it is. Also, Mr. Hickie has been left with just one picture of his daughter. We didn't have many, but what we did have, I gave to the police, he said. I haven't seen them since. I don't know what they did with them. Nobody can tell me. I hope they're not gone. In the absence of anything else, Mr. Hickie would like them back. Now, apparently the dental mould was found later in police storage, and hopefully they found all the other things, including the photos. But I don't know that. But I have seen different photos of Robyn Hickie in the media, so perhaps they were found. Sadly, Jim Hickie passed away from cancer late last year, 2023, without getting final answers to whatever happened to Robyn. I'll now play excerpts of NBN television interviews with Jim and Mary Hickie.
Were you immediately concerned?
Very concerned because it was so out of character for her.
My prime object in all of this is try and find out where she is.
Inquests and investigations delivering no answers.
Probably hopeful that sooner or later, perhaps sooner, that a solution will be arrived at and we can put it all behind us eventually.
Oh, you're always hopeful. You're always hopeful. You want something to happen.
For the father of Robyn Hickie, now 89, the 4-decade-long wait for answers continues.
Because every time a policeman calls on you to check up on something, the whole thing arises again. We always hope, but there's no such thing as closure in this work, none at all.
Today's breakthrough brings no joy for Robyn Hickie's father Jim, now 89.
In our situation, you always hope, but experience teaches you that after a certain amount of time and a certain number of disappointments, particularly with regard to the inquest and what led up to it, that you're bound to be disappointed again.
Jim says the early investigation was bungled and frustratingly police treated Robyn's disappearance as a runaway, even though it was out of character.
After 40 years, it's pretty hard to imagine that there is a new suspect that's credible.
But he's calling for help, as the car could be key to proving the identity of the kidnapper.
If they know somebody who owned that model vehicle in those days, perhaps they could let Crime Stoppers know. We always hope, but as I said to you earlier, there's no such thing as closure in this work, none at all.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. Robyn's father Jim is now 91. He hopes someone will come forward with that final piece of the puzzle.
She went out to meet some friends and just never returned. If we're going to get any answers at all, it has to be fairly soon, doesn't it? I'm not going to last forever.
Sadly, the former high school teacher recently lost his battle with cancer, aged 92.
He spent the last 40 years of his life, or over 40 years of his life, trying to get some closure and keeping every little bit of information that he could find.
His 89-year-old wife Mary says she won't give up on Robyn either, or on Jim's quest for answers.
He was very determined in whatever he did, and he didn't give up at all, not right till the end. As I said, he probably knows now, so he'll be happy. That's a comfort to know, because I'm glad it hasn't been put in the too hard box.
And while Jim tragically missed out on closure, Mary is holding on to hope.
And for my daughter, my other daughter, Louise, she needs to have closure.
Sadly, we don't have any answers yet, or final answers, but hopefully they'll come soon. I did listen to a podcast recently where Jane Goldsmith of NBN News, who's been reporting on the Strike Force Arapaima investigations in recent years, was asked whether she thought there would be a resolution, and she seemed to think that something should come up within the next few years. She felt confident. She said the police had some fairly strong leads, which she couldn't go into. But anyway, if you do have information that you think might help with those disappearances or anything else, please report it, and hopefully those family who are left will get some closure.
Ring us anonymously if you think you have that missing piece of this puzzle. And it's never too late to bring that information to our attention.
So hopefully you've found this video informative, and if you'd like to see more of my videos, please subscribe and click on the bell to be notified when I upload them in future. I'm David A. Elliott. Have a good one and see you around. Like a Rissole.